Welcome back to my channel. My name is Michelle, and today I'm going to be walking you through some of my favorite reads from this summer. If you haven't been to one of my reading wrap-ups before, instead of doing a monthly reading wrap-up, I do my top 10 books every quarter. So this is like my summer books, but it's really just May, June, and July. So these are all the books I read and loved in May, June, and July. Or, well, not all of my books. These are my top 10 books I read in May, June, and July, and these are not in order of like favorite to least favorite or in order of preference. They're in the order I read them. Let's jump into it. So the first book that I read and loved was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I love Emily Henry. If you know anything about me, it's probably that I love Emily Henry. I think she's a queen. I think she can do like literally no wrong. So I was of course very excited to read Book Lovers. Book Lovers, if you don't know, follows the story of Nora and Charlie. Nora is a like really kind of like cutthroat literary agent in New York City, and Charlie is a book editor. And Nora and her sister take a vacation to a small town in South Carolina, where who does she run into but Charlie? And she's had like a weird interaction with Charlie in the past where he was kind of rude to her, and so they don't have the best vibes. But then obviously there's chemistry. And this story is largely about their romance, but it's also about Nora's relationship with her younger sister. And like all Emily Henry books, it also feels very much like a therapy session as she like unpacks all of her like, you know, trauma from her past. It's gorgeous. Emily Henry can like do no wrong. Her books are always brilliant. I'm so excited for her next book, which she just announced is coming out next April. I will read it and probably love it. Then right after that, I read another like 5-star book that I absolutely loved. This book surprised me. It was a book that I almost didn't finish because it was so confusing in the first little bit. I almost stopped it at like the 10% mark because I was like, I have no idea what's going on. And that's The Last House on Needless Street. This book is like really hard to describe because you are like very confused in the beginning. But when everything comes together, I like felt like my confusion was like well worth it. But it is about this man who, it like follows a lot of different characters. We follow like this man who lives in this house and this little girl who lives in this house and this cat, and they all live, we think, in the same house. You're assuming. I think we know that. They all live in the same house, okay? And so we're like kind of following all of these strange characters, and it's so confusing. Like I don't know how to explain it, but it comes together so interestingly, and so I feel like it was so well done and so tied together. So I gave 5 stars to The Last House on Needless Street. I had my mom read it after me because I loved it so much, and she didn't love it quite as much as me. She still gave it 4 stars, but she was like, why did you give it 5 stars? She was confused by my love for it, but I just think it's like masterfully woven and like so interesting. And once I kind of like got into it and had like a better sense of what was going on, I was like flipping pages. I like couldn't read through it fast enough, and I loved it. The next book that I read and absolutely adored this over the summer has been Conversations with Friends from Sally Rooney. I read Normal People last year and like thought it was fine. I gave it 4 stars, but Conversations with Friends was just like outstanding. Like outstanding. I became a Sally Rooney girly. I was like, I don't care if you don't use quotation marks. You are the author for me. I absolutely loved this story. It's the story of Bobby and Frances. Frances is our heroine, and she writes poetry and she performs it with Bobby. They're like performing partners, and they kind of catch the eye of this writer and actor couple, and they wind up spending a lot of time with them, and then Frances winds up having an affair with the husband, with Nick. And so it's about her relationship with Nick and also about her relationship with Bobby, and also she's going through like, she's not a lot of like medical issues as well. Like most Sally Rooney stories, it's not like super plot heavy. It's definitely like a character study in Frances as she goes through this time period, but I just like absolutely loved it. I like really enjoyed Frances as a character. I thought she was really compelling, and I just like truly adored it. I have not watched the adaptation yet. I've watched like 1 episode, but I haven't heard great things, which is such a bummer because Normal People, the adaptation, is just like stunningly beautiful. Next, I read Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman. I thought this book was just like so gorgeously written. Like it is just like truly beautiful. There is a weird scene with the peach. Like that is not a lie. If you've like heard anything about this book, it's probably that there's a weird scene with a peach, and there is. It is about this 17-year-old boy who lives in Italy. It's about like an Italian summer. He lives in Italy. His parents are like professors, and every year they have like a grad student come and stay with them for the summer and like work on their research. This summer a young man comes and stays with them, and him and the son have like this like summer romance. And the book is just like so stunningly written. You like feel like you're in an Italian summer. Like reading it was like looking at like a gorgeous painting. Like it was just like such a beautiful experience. Subject matter is like a little, like I said, there's like definitely some weird stuff that happens. It's a 17-year-old and an adult man, so like do with that what you will. But I just felt like it was so beautifully written that like I had to give it 5 stars. I read Hands Down by Mariana Zapata. Hands Down by Mariana Zapata is a Mariana Zapata classic. It is actually a spin-off of The Wild of Winnipeg. This follows Zach, who is like the happy guy. So it's like a little bit of a change of pace from a typical Mariana Zapata because he's friendly and so is she. It's like a second chance romance. Him, Zach, and the girl whose name I have forgotten knew each other as children, but at some point in their like teenage years they fell out of touch. She's always had a crush on him, but it was like unreciprocated, and now he's like a big NFL football star, and they like reconnect, and then obviously romance ensues. I love Mariana Zapata. Like, it is 100% just like the books for me. I know it's not for everyone, but like her books just like release so much dopamine in my brain, and I can't help it. Then I read In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. This is a thriller. It's like The Secret History. This is how I would describe it. The Secret History minus all the Greek mythology and all the pretension, which like doesn't leave you with a lot. No, we had like a thriller element, but it's like a similar vibe, and it's a group of friends from college. One of them was murdered while they were at college. Now they're back at their like 10-year reunion. We're going back and forth from like the past while they were in college together and like back to their reunion, and we're trying to like piece together what happened to the girl who was murdered. My only complaint for this is there is no knife. So I'm a little confused by the title because the woman was murdered with scissors. So, but I really enjoyed it. It's a fun, very different for me. It wasn't a thriller I had read before, which I feel like is sometimes hard to find in the thriller genre. I've read a lot of thrillers, no shame to thriller writers. I've read a lot of thrillers, so sometimes it's hard for me to find a thriller that feels new, and this one did feel like a new, fresh perspective. And then I also read Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This book you've probably seen everywhere. It has such a beautiful cover. This book is about this young woman, she's like 20 maybe, and she gets a letter from her cousin. Her cousin has, before the novel started, been recently married to this man, and they've moved to his mansion in the like rural parts of Mexico, and it is about this other woman going to like rescue her cousin from a situation that seems kind of sketchy, and it's about unpacking kind of the strangeness that is around this like mansion in the rural mountains, and it takes place in 1950s Mexico, and so we kind of have that setting, and I really enjoyed it. It's a fun time. Then I read We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. This is my first Shirley Jackson besides The Lottery. I, of course, read The Lottery because I went to school in America. But this is my first novel I've read by her. I loved, obviously, the Haunting of Hill House adaptation. I know they're very dissimilar, but I've also heard her name a lot in reference. I mean, you can't talk about women in horror without talking about Shirley Jackson or even American literature. So I really wanted to read her. And I loved We've Always Lived in the Castle. It is about these 2 sisters who live in this like big mansion on top of a hill, and they're kind of like pariahs from the town. We don't fully know why. We like slowly learn why over the course of the novel. It's told from the younger sister's perspective. Something bad happens in the house, and like things go down from there. But I love the perspective we're in this younger sister who's like 10 or 11 probably. That's what it feels like. She's like definitely a child, and she's very angry, and I loved her. She was so much fun. My next read was Long White River by Liz Moore. This is like a detective story. I went into it thinking it was a thriller. I don't really think it's a thriller. It's more of a mystery. This is a detective story about this woman who she's not a detective. It's like a big point of the novel is she's not a detective, she's a police officer. She's a police officer in like a rough part of Philadelphia. She has been forever. She's grown up in this neighborhood. Her sister is an addict. And so she kind of interacts with her sister a lot, and there's like an interesting conversation around power dynamics between especially impoverished communities and the police that work in them, and also about addiction and those sorts of things and like the cyclical nature of that. It's really gorgeous. I really loved the family dynamics that it explored and kind of the really nuanced take on the opioid epidemic and addiction in general. Like I thought it was definitely like I was turning the page to figure out what was going to happen next, but also I felt like it was like a very compassionate and nuanced conversation around addiction, which I think is important. Next, I read Juniperthorne by Ava Reed. I loved this book. I thought it was just like really beautifully written. It's written in a very like fairy tale style, but like very like prose that is both like lyrical and kind of gross, that I think is like my favorite. My favorite genre of horror at the moment is like pretty gross, you know, or pretty spooky. Feels very similar to like House of Hollow, but much darker and much more adult. It is an adult book. I feel like the cover doesn't do a great job like depicting that, but it is an adult book. It takes place in Russia in like the Tsar times, so when they're czars, and it is about these three sisters. They're witches. They're the daughters of the last wizard in Oblia, and so there's like magic that is this undercurrent, and they're kind of like trapped in the house, and their dad is like kind of the worst, and so they're kind of victim to his whims. And it's about the youngest sister. That's the perspective we're following. It's about her. She goes to the ballet one night and she falls in love with one of the ballet dancers, and it's about her and this like forbidden relationship, and also about like the magic of her house and of her sisters. It is really good, really beautifully written. I absolutely loved it. And then I read Funny You Should Ask by Alyssa Sussman. This is a rom-com, and it was just like exactly what I needed when I read it. Like it was just one of those rom-coms that just like hit at the perfect moment. It follows two timelines. The first timeline, there's a journalist, this woman who is interviewing this man who's like her celebrity crush. And their interview kind of like winds up spreading into the whole weekend, and she winds up spending the weekend with him and writing this like essay about like her time with him that gets like pretty famous and kind of really launches her writing career. And there's some like chemistry in that first weekend, but then they like never speak to each other again. And then 10 years in the future, she is interviewing him again. And it is about kind of what happened over those interceding 10 years, also what happened in that first weekend, and then like will their chemistry that they maybe had 10 years ago be reunited in this 10 years later interview. It was just like sweet and perfect and like exactly what I wanted to read. And then my last pick from my summer reading, I loved One Italian Summer by Rebecca Sturley. Rebecca Sturley is one of my favorite authors. I really love the stories she writes. There are these like kind of like light twists on like classic women's fiction stories. This one follows this woman who is grieving the loss of her mother. Her mother was like her best friend, and she's recently passed away, and so she winds up taking this trip to Italy that she was supposed to take with her mother, and it's kind of like a retracing of her mother's like a trip her mother took when she was younger. And it's about this trip to Italy she takes, and again, just like Call Me By Your Name. Call Me By Your Name does it better, but like I don't know if you could do it better than Call Me By Your Name. This is in Positano, and it is just like gorgeous and made me want to go to Italy. It's like a gorgeous, fun book. Did I cry? Absolutely. I sobbed in this book because it is really about grief. This woman grieving her mother and trying to figure out what her life looks like without having her mother there as like a lens in which to view her own life. But I absolutely loved it. So those are my summer favorites. All the books I read this summer well, not all of them. There are more books that I read and enjoyed, but like my top favorite books that I read over the summer. Let me know what your favorite book was that you read this summer. I would love to know. I'm always looking for a new good book. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.